This is an example of a rational equation. A rational equation is one that is a fraction. So whenever you hear the word rational, you can equate that to fraction. Now, the first thing you need to do when you have a rational equation is to look at each denominator and determine what would make that denominator equal to 0. Now, this first one, it would be 0 itself. So 0 is equal to 0. Our first answer then is going to be 0 because this is called the restrictions. Restrictions are numbers which give you a 0 denominator. Now, you may wonder what's the big deal about a 0 denominator. Remember, 0 denominators, back from when you were a kid and studying fractions, a 0 denominator meant something was undefined. And if it's undefined, we do not want to use that in our answers. So what we have here is we have our 0 is one of our restrictions. Now, if I take that 8x and put it equal to 0, what would make that second denominator 0? We'll just solve it. Divide both sides by 8, and you see it's the same thing, right? So in both cases, the only number that would give us a 0 denominator is 0 itself. So for the first answer, what value or values would make the denominator 0? Solve that, and then check your answer. Once you solve and check that answer, then part B will pop up. Part B is where you will actually solve the equation. Okay, now you see that our 0 was the correct answer. So we are going to take our equation, 3 over x equals 21 over 8x plus 3. And we're going to solve that now. To solve a fraction equation, find the least common denominator and use that to cancel out the fraction. The least common denominator here is going to be 8x. I say that it's 8x because if I put 8x next to this first fraction, notice how I can cross cancel out the x's. That would leave me 8 times 3, which is 24. Also, if I put the 8x next to the other terms on the other side of the equation, remember now, what you do to one side, you have to do the other side. Then the 8x would cancel out exactly with that 21, leaving just a 21, plus I do not cancel the 3 and the 8 because the 3 wasn't a fraction anyway. Just go ahead and multiply those two together, and that's going to be 24x. So the equation that I'm really trying to solve here is 24 equals 21 plus 24x. So remember, when we solve for x, we want to get the x by itself. So one way to do that here is I could subtract 21 on both sides of the equation. That would leave me 3 equals 24x. Then always divide out the number in front of the x. That's the coefficient, remember. And that means my x is equal to this fraction 3 over 24. Now always reduce your fractions. If you think about it, the fraction 3 over 24 is divisible by 3. If I divide the top number by 3, I get 1. 3 divided by 3. And if I divide that bottom number by 3, I get 8. This would be my reduced answer, and that's the answer I put in here for part A. I would type in the fraction 1/8. Here's another example of a rational equation. Notice that both of the denominators are the same. They're x minus 1. So remember, we need to find the value that makes our denominator 0 first. That's going to be our restrictions. So I take x minus 1, and I always set it equal to 0 and solve. If I add 1 to both sides, then x is equal to 1. Therefore, my first answer for part A is 1. Once you type that in and check your answer, part B answer will pop up. And that's where you actually solve the original equation. The original equation is 2 over x minus 1 plus 3 equals 17 over x minus 1. Whatever is in the denominator here, I can use as my LCD that will cross cancel out. So x minus 1 will be placed beside the first fraction. Notice it will cross cancel, leaving just a 2. X minus 1 will also be placed next to this 3. However, it does not cross cancel out. So I have 3 and the x minus 1 left over. On the last fraction, on the last side, if I put the x minus 1 there, it does cross cancel, leaving just 17. The next thing to do would be to distribute here in the middle part of this equation. 3 times x is 3x. 3 times negative 1 is negative 3. Just bring everything else down. I can also combine like terms that are on the same side. That 2 minus 3 is really a negative 1. So I have 3x negative 1 equals 17. I'm trying to solve for the x. So I can add 1 to both sides, and I end up with 3x equals 18. And last, you always divide by the number in front, and x is equal to 6. That will be my second answer, which is the solution to this equation. So the part B answer is 6. If you ever have the same answer for part B that you get for part A, then you will put no solution.